Appreciate it. And I want to first start by saying hello and inviting everyone to stand up for a quick stretch break. Or if you don't want to stand up, just like sort of move around and like, let's get some energy back because it's been an hour and a half and we've gone through a lot of really amazing content. And it's nice to sort of reframe the mind here. So I'm going to do that. Take a little sip of my coffee here. Take a breath and say hello. My name is Chris Garriott. I'm a global sales specialist for Azure AI. I've been at Microsoft for not too long of an amount of time here. We've actually just created a whole brand new team supporting Azure OpenAI, which I'll talk about in a second. But I've been doing AI for what seems like an eternity in the world of both AI and generative AI, where I was at Google starting in 2018, working on enterprise AI projects, both in the energy industry as well as the oil and gas space, as well as moving through all of our digital natives. And then was at Oracle for about a year as well, looking at how we were sort of integrating with NVIDIA around partnerships to bring GPU use cases out through the cloud. So there's been a lot of experience in this concept of enterprise grade generative AI, especially, or enterprise grade AI, and now adding enterprise grade generative AI as the OpenAI announcements, and just that product has taken the world by storm. So I mentioned that this is a relatively new engagement for me at Microsoft. If y'all saw me earlier, I was a little cold, so I had to put on the Microsoft jacket here. The team that I'm on at Microsoft actually really focuses around holistic support of customers developing AI applications. And some of our earlier speakers alluded to this. My team at Microsoft actually not only has sales specialists like me that have been doing this for a little while and AI experts, but also machine learning experts to go sort of that one layer deeper in terms of the breadth and history and context around how we got here, because generative AI does not meet every application, although that's what we're talking about today. And then holistically, we also have app dev specialists, because again, we think about this stuff as developing AI applications, and whether that AI application is internal or external, sort of integrating across all of the different business products that you have, or really using as a chatbot for your employee productivity. Like, that's the way that we start thinking about AI here. And so we actually have field specialists that are coming from large scale, like front end, back end integrated software development like backgrounds, in order to help with this app dev concept. And then for people that are looking at sort of increased learning, we have a huge, huge repository of learning through Microsoft Learning that is publicly available through our learning platform. And then I'll do a quick plug for our user conference that's coming up next week. It's called Microsoft Ignite. Many product announcements are going to happen here. And so there's actually a limited amount that I can talk about now. I'll allude to some of it, but I can't really scoop the Microsoft Ignite conference. So please sign up for that, and I'll create a link or add a link into the end of this presentation that y'all can take a look at and hopefully attend some of the virtual sessions, especially around generative AI and Microsoft's leading position in that. So now I'll move forward into the content, what we're going to talk about today, specifically around the partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft. And what we're going to be doing is talking through some of the customer use cases here, some of the capabilities that we have, and then I'll be actually running through a live demo of both a potential internal enterprise customer application, as well as a demo of Bing Enterprise Chat, which up until yesterday was the best way to look on the internet for GPT-4 actually having live internet search capability. But now, if y'all are following the OpenAI announcements, we now have that capability inside of OpenAI in like their GPT-4 model. So I can talk about some of the differences there too. So first of all, the Microsoft partnership with OpenAI. In 2019, I'm sure you're familiar, we've invested $1 billion into OpenAI. And in 2023, we just finished our investment commitment to them with another 10 billion. And this doesn't specifically, just give them Azure credits, right? What this does is it gives AI research and development. And that's the space where we really want to keep investing, and why we didn't just simply like acquire OpenAI, but instead looked at them as a true partner in this space. So as you look at what that partnership has done, when OpenAI releases products, Microsoft is a fast follow to implement those products on the Microsoft Azure platform. And so when you think about the Azure OpenAI service, really what it's doing is it's enterprise grade productionizing the Azure or the OpenAI capabilities and the models that are coming out of there, so that we can extend that both throughout Microsoft and into our customer base that is using Azure. So moving forward from here, why should I listen as a customer to Microsoft? We have 11,000 organizations across the board or across the globe, including IKEA, Volvo Group, Zurich Insurance, and a whole swath of digital natives that are using the Azure OpenAI service, which, if you're keeping track, is as of August of last year, 100 new customers every day over the quarter added. And for example, Mercedes-Benz is bringing ChatGPT via Azure OpenAI into 900,000 vehicles in the US. Snowflake is integrating with us as well. KPMG announced a multi-billion-dollar commit to Azure AI, and I can talk about that customer use case in just a second. But this is the scale that we're dealing with here as we talk about our leading position from a place of sort of confidence and like capability around generative AI and how to use it. And it was really cool to hear some of the ways that my colleagues earlier were talking about how to use generative AI specifically, around using like the retrieval augmented generation patterns and all that stuff, because it's really a fundamental sort of shift in the way that we think about using these models. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So inspired by our customers, Coca-Cola, for example, is creating immediate digital ad campaigns on demand from using the combination of ChatGPT 4 and DALL-E 3. Coursera is using multiple cases in here to sort of help users find and delight through various online content, as well as using the chat-to-speech capabilities of Whisper, which I'll talk about in a minute here. So these are just some of our sort of key light customers. H&R Block, IKEA, KPMG is doing a tax like internal application, which I'll talk about. And this shows sort of the breadth that we're working with here. And if, excuse me there, if you think about where Microsoft is really engaged, and I talked about how OpenAI, Microsoft is a fast follow towards integrating this onto the Azure platform. Microsoft itself is built on Azure. And so what that allows us to do is to scale OpenAI's, GPT, like LLMs into our internal products. So as we go sort of from the bottom of the stack here with our machine learning platform and then customizable AI models, including the OpenAI service, what we see is the integration of this throughout all of the products that we sell. So inclusively into our applications builder and then our end applications through our copilots through Microsoft 365. And interestingly, Amazon just redid a deal with Microsoft for $1 billion to reinvest in Microsoft 365. And I would bet, although I don't know for sure, that has a lot to do with our copilots that are coming out. And so if you think about it for a second, what is the strategy around copilots right now and sort of Microsoft's AI capabilities? Really, we have this in three buckets. We have our AI copilots, which are sort of our SaaS application end products that go into Microsoft 365. And then we have our custom copilots, which are available for developing on your own as a sort of corollary into the various business applications that you have. And then you have our full development stack, which you can use through our Azure AI Studio or Azure ML Studio to get access to at a programmer level, at a developer level, the capability of these models, right? And so as we look at sort of where are the customers engaging with AI across this full suite of their own data, that's the way that they tend to sort of bucket the touch points that we have. So as I mentioned, developing a custom copilot, really in the Microsoft terms, this is a whole deep dive presentation on its own that goes level 200 all the way down level 400 and beyond around the concepts of how we develop custom copilots. But really what this does is it looks at those retrieval augmented generation patterns that and philosophies that we sort of talked about earlier. And it puts that into something that is enterprise productionizable, right? And I should take a step back at this point to talk about why do we do this sort of in Azure and why do we do this in Microsoft as opposed to just going directly to OpenAI. And there are various use cases for both, and I'll talk about this in our demo a little bit, but really the concept of using OpenAI through Azure gives you the scalability, the enterprise-grade capability, and the security and compliance, as well as the responsible AI metrics that Microsoft puts in place on Azure as it is. And so then when we talk about building safety systems for responsible AI tools or integrating the data privacy metrics that you've come to expect from Microsoft, those are things that are developed inherently into the implementation of the OpenAI models. And so you have a confidence when using Azure OpenAI Service that your data is never available to other customers. It's not available to OpenAI. It's not used to improve OpenAI models. It's not used to improve any of Microsoft or our third-party services. And it's not even actually used to improve your own model because these models are stateless. unless of course you're doing fine tuning, in which case the fine tuning experience is customized, but that is something that is proprietary to your Azure instance and never allowed to be shared between other customers. And so exclusively then your data is your own, and we never ever touch it in these enterprise experiences. So models and capabilities, and I'm going a little fast here because I really want to get to the demo. GPT-4, brand new, amazing. Well, not even brand new anymore. Amazing. And then OpenAI just launched a whole new update to this GPT-4 Turbo, which is fantastic. And that'll be on the Azure platform, I believe, by the end of the year. So that's something that we can sort of expect, and more details to come with that at Ignite next week. Speaking of OpenAI for a second, I don't know if any of y'all saw the dev days, but Satya stood up next to Sam and they said that this is the best partnership in tech. And so it was really cool to see that out there. I just kind of geeked out on it a little bit. Our OpenAI service includes both GPT-4, which is state of the art, GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is a great sort of cost conscious way to still get all of the benefits of a massively trained model, and then integrating DALL-E as well, so that we can start doing the image generation that is so critical in terms of dealing with retail spaces and content creation. Our generative AI plus document intelligence is an amazing experience. And when we talk about use your own data and bring your own data to the platform, those are things that are incredibly interesting when you start combining the capability of generative AI to look at documents, and then also with Azure Cognitive Search, or really any semantic search and vector database, because then you can start really honing in from documents that are keyword search, how to start looking at that as an interpretive experience for the AI. And then looking down, we talked about the additional models here. Whisper is OpenAI's speech to text, and it's fantastic for looking at audio, video, transcriptions and things like that. So I mentioned earlier that we have some new announcements coming out at Ignite, and one of them right now, Azure AI Studio is in private preview. Azure AI Studio is our real philosophy is to bring sort of all of this development from prompt engineering, especially from a low code standpoint, and potentially even a no code standpoint, depending on sort of how you do this, into one platform, right? So looking at the capabilities around creating new prompts, vector indexing, organizing your own data, building and training your own models. Azure AI Studio is going to be the one-stop shop for that. And it's really meant to be sort of the front-end interface towards large-scale application development on Microsoft and Microsoft Azure, so that you can then create holistic applications using LLMs. And it has obviously AI safety built right into it in terms of customizing for various levels of sensitivity. So it's a really, really phenomenal product that I don't have time to go into now, but I highly recommend looking at the announcements around this from Ignite next week, because it genuinely solves all of these problems of how do we amalgamate all of these models together and start building and stitching these things between them using, potentially even LangChain, right? Which is an open source supported capability inside of that. So I mentioned that it is, Azure OpenAI Service on your data. Here's a quick architecture slide for that. And then again, very basic, right? But we start really conceptualizing the concept of building an AI application through this. So getting into some of the more interesting things, right? So introduction to some of our top use cases. And I know that everyone on this call is very interested in that. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A here if you're interested in this as well. So business problems, productivity, process automation, degraded customer experience, creating content is time consuming. And what we're seeing, right, is through the sort of issue, right, the business needs increasing productivity, automating some processes, improving customer experience, and building creative content are natural fallouts that have solutions grounded in the concepts of generative AI. And so what can generative AI do is we can generate new revenue streams based around solving these business needs, delivering differentiated customer experiences and modernizing processes. So who's doing this, right? So Coca-Cola, I mentioned, is specifically looking at how to generate on-demand content for various marketing campaigns that they're trying to solve or that they're trying to launch. KPMG is actually using an initial chatbot that they engaged with us around March of this year, and iterating on that now to actually have it search on and be able to pull recommendations from the internal documentation that KPMG does around tax preparation, and be able to use that as a transformative experience for professional services, so that tax information can get deeply into the hands of each of their service agents. And so as they've now sort of iterated on this internal chatbot, they've committed a significant amount of time and investment into Azure OpenAI because it's being this like cohesive fabric around. And speaking of fabric, by the way, Fabric is this layer that we're also launching next week. There's announcements around it at Microsoft Ignite, and that allows you to pull data from pretty much anywhere, including AWS and GCP. So back to sort of capabilities and scenarios, summarization, code generation, again, semantic search. And where we're seeing this used very deeply is in telecommunications, manufacturing, and automotive and mobility. So looking sort of at more, right, where is the automotive and mobility and transportation industry really going? Contact center is a huge one for them, specifically public references in CarMax, BMW, Mercedes, and automated documents and processing, incident reporting and prediction, and then automated content generation. Everyone is using, and that's where generative AI is really, shines, is in content generation. Financial services, people are using this in content center, and specifically in document processing, as well as internal sort of support for virtual agents and employee communication. Manufacturing is using, again, content center, technical support, anomaly detection, and virtual agents with Copilot. The anomaly detection one I want to talk about for just a second, because that's really cool. You can actually, if you were to go to something where you're doing a large scale sort of simulation of your manufacturing environment, you can use generative AI to generate synthetic data that looks real so that you can train your models that are machine learning based that might not have enough real world data on actual simulated data. And I'll just say that again, you can use AI to generate data to train machine learning models to then predict failures in the future. And it's a phenomenal concept that we've seen put into place in terms of anomaly detection around manufacturing industries that are really leaning into this concept of consolidated data. Telecommunications as well, content center, and real-time speech summarization. So health and life sciences is the biggest, field that we've kind of seen this in terms of patient electronic health records. Epic is one of our key customers there, and we're working with them to use GPT-4 to have a two-way impact. Number one, less time entering keyboard information, and number two, investigating data in a more conversational way, so doctors can get really back to being doctors, and they don't have to store all of this encyclopedic information, in the same, sort of way. And one of the real cool, use cases from this that falls out is that if you have a doctor that is, looking at sort of a rare medical condition, and you have a chat GPT that is trained on all of this data, it can start making these correlations in ways that were just never possible before, and start really finding out, like solutions and diagnostics for these like very rare diseases. All right, so I'm going to stop presenting now, this little slideshow here, and the rest of this presentation is great. I'm about halfway through it. Obviously, we've taken a little bit of time to do this, but I don't want to go through the rest of it. I'll send it out and y'all can peruse it and then ask any questions you'd like. I'm going to stop sharing this and instead move over to sharing my, let's minimize that. Okay, screen share, and I'm going to go on my demo here. All right, share. Perfect. So now I've got my demo. Hopefully we can all see it. Perfect. Cool. So this is Contoso. Contoso is a retail company that has lots and lots of not only hundreds of storefronts, but also like a digital online store. And they just have a brand new CEO that wants to be able to interact with their data around responsible AI. So what did we do? We built a little demo that talks about, from an indexed database of internal documents, what responsible AI means to Contoso. So first thing I want to show you here, right, is this is specifically interacting with a chatbot, right? Let's just test to see that it doesn't know, that it's only limited, I should say, to its own internal data. So I want to go in there and say something like, who is the Prince of Dubai? And if I ask it that, it goes, hopefully, I have no idea. It's thinking about it, generating an answer. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. Or it could be like, tell me about the world. And it's going to say, I don't know, right? It's a very broad question. I don't really know, okay? So if I go in and say, all right, well, let's clear the chat here. Instead, we're going to start asking it about our data that we've trained it on. How can we make sure AI systems follow ethical human principles and values? And as it thinks about the answer, we start seeing some really interesting features pop out here. Number one is it's using citations to actually like tell us where it got this information from. So we really are addressing the concepts of hallucination and really like leaning into transparency here. And so if I want to look at this, we've programmed this to do this, but you can actually ask it for its thought process. And so we can see how the prompt was engineered. And then we can also see the sources that it looked through in order to provide that. And if we want that in a slightly more sort of like usable format, we can look at where it pulled this data from. And then we can even actually look at the citations here in terms of the PDF documents that it was pulled from. So very cool, right? But now we'd like to figure out if we can use it in addition to what we've already given it as a database. And this is, again, cognitive search. So we're not like pre-training these models, or we're not like fine-tuning these models. We're giving it a concept of here's a database that is searchable via semantic search and cognitive search, excuse me, and use the pre-trained capabilities you have to interpret that. So if I want to try my own data on this now, I can actually select files from the computer, and we'll pull this up here. So we'll add two new process documents and responsible AI documents here. So I'll open those up, upload them, and this takes a second. But what we'll be able to see here is that the capability of the model now to go in and index the not only pre-configured database that we gave it, but also the new like files that we've uploaded here, makes it a really powerful way to interact with our own data. And so we can actually ask it a question here around, let's see here. So what are the best practices for, let's see, I copied and pasted some of this stuff. How does Microsoft's responsible AI program work to identify, measure, and mitigate potential harms in AI technology like Bing? So now that we've uploaded our data, it'll actually sit here and look through that and provide us now citations through the documentation that we uploaded earlier, okay? So now let's say that we want to open it up and say, okay, you're a pre-trained model, you've got access to all this data, you're using GPT-3.5 in this case, right? We've got access to all this, pre-trained data, right? So now if we say use pre-trained knowledge, we can actually ask it again, who is the Prince of Dubai? And what it'll do is now use its pre-trained knowledge to go outside of where we told it that it could live to answer questions that are outside of the context of responsible AI. So any questions on that, feel free to pop into the question and answer. And in the remaining couple of minutes, I'll actually go through our Bing search, Bing Chat Enterprise, excuse me, demo here, which I really, really love. So Bing Chat Enterprise is the enterprise chat, or sorry, excuse me, is the enterprise like search AI chatbot that lives in basically like a professional enterprise like system in order to allow users to search the internet with the combination of AI. Oh, great question. So the Contoso data is still safe when you open it up to pre-trained data. Yes. And the reason being is because the data governance in terms of how the model is searching for the data that it's like pulling the information from basically says that the data database that you've created or that we've created that has all the responsible AI data is never fed back into anything outside of the tenant that AI is running in. So even though that AI exists inside of the customer's application, it doesn't ever feed that data that it indexed back into back into OpenAI, for example, or back into any other service inside of Microsoft, other than what's sort of localized inside of the tenant. And so in that way, it allows you to use all of the data that was accessible to GPT-3.5 or GPT-4, right? And supplement it with your own data. So hopefully that makes sense. And we've said answer live. So if there's any other questions or follow-up to that, happy to answer them. So Bing Chat Enterprise, that was kind of a sloppy way for me to maybe describe Bing Chat Enterprise. So I'm going to let Bing Chat Enterprise actually tell you what it is. And so I'm going to ask it, tell me the latest about Bing Chat Enterprise, including the OpenAI Dev Days content that was just announced on November 6th. and it's going to search about Bing Chat Enterprise. It's going to be also searching for the dev days, and it's going to tell me the latest about it. And it's going to also give me citations in here, right? And so it provides enhanced commercial data protection for users accessing the generative AI capabilities of Bing Chat. It's enabled by default for Microsoft 365 users. It does not save any chat data, so it again falls in line with really protecting the data of the individual user and individual business, right? You can manage access to chat and things, and if you'd like to turn it off, you can do some things, right? As for the OpenAI Dev Days content, it's now summarizing content that it found from the internet live into the response for this. And so we can see that it had its first dev day, and it's going to create like a new GPT store and all that good stuff. So I think this is a really like amazing way to, as a individual user, not violate the data privacy requirements and data governance requirements of my own organization, Microsoft, and still be able to get the advantage of searching the internet through an AI agent. So what else can we do with this, right? So there is some really amazing stuff that you can do with GPT-4 and coding. And if let's say that I'm a developer inside of Microsoft and I have this legacy code and it's been poorly documented, which never happens, obviously, and the developer may have retired a number of years ago and we don't know anything about it. So what I can do is I can actually like ask, what does this code below, what is the code below and what does it do? And I can give it a code snippet that I might have, and I can ask it. And I can say, what is this? And it tells me the code that I've posted is written in COBOL, which is cool. Go IBM. And it then tells me what it does, which I think is amazing. So we'll give it a little while to talk about it. Tells us our file definitions, our data definitions. It really like summarizes this, and it gives it in a very readable format here that someone who isn't a developer like can go back and look even, which is really, really cool. And this allows us to then increase the productivity of the developers that are coming at maybe code for the first time or don't know. And the beauty of Chat Enterprise is that it keeps all of that data internal to Microsoft, right? And so it doesn't spit that out to the general internet. I'm not like exposing my code out into the world this way. And this is a very secure way of basically interacting with this. And so now I can do something very cool, like say, okay, well, COBOL's great, but we don't use that. Let's rewrite the code in Python. And so I can tell it to rewrite the code. And here it goes. And so now as we rewrite this code, we actually have it in a more usable sort of format for us internally, because now we're going. And it tells us what the Python script does, but it needs the students.dat file, right? And it says it even right here. It needs this right here. So you can say, okay, cool. Well, give me an example of the students.dat file. And it then generates what the input file might look like for this. So we're right at 2:00 right now, my time. I'm in Austin. If there is the appetite, I can go through a couple of more demonstrations on here, which we've got some really cool image generation and content creation capabilities through this. Or I'm happy to turn it back to Ron in order to sort of finish out the webinar. So Ron, why don't you give me some direction there?
Well, a couple of things. I think this was great. I think a lot of people might be interested, quite honestly, in some of the image creation. Sure. I know my daughter, of course, was interested in ChatGPT as she was applying to college. I had a reminder that, and this is what a lot of the current essays do, they can give you, they're acknowledging that students are going to use ChatGPT to write these, but I said, it's just to help you get started. It has to be your work. But now I think it's been very recent where ChatGPT has been expanded to include image creation. I can also tell you that next year's election, there were some deep fake concerns. It is going to be mind-boggling, the amount of deep fake content that's out there. People are going to impersonate me if I ever get famous or something. And so I think that'll be interesting. But so I'm going to keep this going, but I just want to let everyone else know that all the content will be available probably on Monday, all the videos of each session. We'll have all the slides up. We've got some great future webinars going on with regard to next week on Thursday on public sector government educational deployments. Then in December, on December 7th, we've got about 4 or 5 different Microsoft speakers. We've got a session all about cloud security, AI development that's very Microsoft centric. Then on the 13th of December, one that's very AWS centric. In a sense, the one you'll see in December is basically a composite of Microsoft Ignite, lots of different topics condensed into one session. In a similar sense, the AWS program on the 13th is a condensed version of reInvent. So take a look at that. They're all available on angelbeat.com. I'm going to encourage everyone to stick around, but this will mark, quote unquote, the end of the formal webinar. Though if people have questions, you can let me know. If anyone wants special workshops, if you want to get insights from other companies, but at least for the next 15 minutes, no big deal. I'm going to turn off my camera. I'll do some other things and listen and learn myself. Oh, let me do this. They wanted to know, can this create, Chris is with Verizon. Let me see if Chris is still there. We always like, Chris, I see your question was about a batch PowerShell. So I'm going to let everyone else go. But Chris, if you want to directly ask your question and give a little context, and then everyone else can just stick around and we'll go through the image demos. Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah. So why don't you ask your question? Chris, I believe you're with Verizon, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious if you could take a maybe a list of names and numbers and have a PowerShell script created the same way that you just did with Python.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And specifically around, creating scripts and, like doing this inside of Windows systems, this is where this like Copilot and custom Copilot thing really comes in handy. Because effectively what you're doing is you're creating the ability to integrate between various like disparate applications with our custom Copilots. And so what that allows you to do is to stitch together commands and flows that may not be native to one even particular LLM. So let's say that, for example, GPT-4 is the best at doing, like law applications or whatever, but, you don't have that like, super good ability, in GPT-3.5 to do math. And this is not a great example, but, the point being is that each of these LLMs or each of these ML capabilities or each of these even just like search capabilities have different strengths. So stitching them all together is the thing that the custom copilots do. And so it's absolutely able to do that and to sort of move between prompting even for various applications. And I'll actually run through something relatively like if you abstracted all of that into be like, okay, we're going to do that for content generation for just a second. This is what this next demo part is about. So Chris, does that kind of get you, a little bit of the way? And then if you want some more, I'm happy to help you align to the team that supports Verizon.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. You've answered my question. I'd like to see more though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you can always reach out to, everyone probably on the call has an, Microsoft account exec, reach out and be like, yo, I want to hear about these particular things with these generative AI stuff. And they will pull in people from my team that will be able to support you. Absolutely.
And by the way, if you're wondering who your account rep is, you can just contact me and then we can sort it out for you and contact Chris and his colleagues. Yeah. No problem. Okay, Chris, all yours.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate the question. All right, yeah, so what we're going to do here is we're going to start looking and playing with image generation and how that relates to a potential retailer scenario, right? And again, Bing Chat Enterprise is really just the front end to this, the most sort of user experience, like capable user experience for someone who does not have a coding background like I do, or like I don't. And so this is something where you would productionize this in, for example, AI Studio, but I can show you a lot of the mechanisms for it through AI Bing Chat Enterprise. And so what I want to start doing is generating an image of a red tent in a forest by a lake with a human upside down doing a handstand, just because that seemed fun. So actually what I want to do is, well, we can just let it go. So it'll keep the context from the previous conversation we were doing on coding, and then it'll sort of add this in. And I've enabled the precise mode of this. And so it's trying to create things. It's pretty like short in terms of being verbose. So now it's actually trying to generate some images. And we'll give it a second. It's kind of a cool little AI. AI art is so interesting to me these days because it all looks like this like fluffy stuff. But like, check out these things, right? Like this is Dolly 3, by the way. And like you can like this was just generated from that text input. I think it's phenomenal, right? So okay, so I've got a red tent, I've got a human doing a handstand, there's a forest, there's a lake. So I can save this image. And then oh, you get a little picture of my kids, which is cool. I don't know if y'all can see that. I'll go to demos and save it over here. So tent example 2. All right. So now that that's downloaded, I can actually upload that back in. And if I go to demos, I can see this tent example 2. Open. And I can say, write a product announcement for this image based on this image that would appear on rei.com. And it does some things like privacy blurring, faces. So it doesn't actually like generate, which is a part of our copyright like commitment, by the way. And so those are things where like logos get real sketchy, in Dolly 3 specifically, because we don't want to like violate copyrights, and OpenAI certainly doesn't want to violate copyrights, and that's a big deal. And they actually announced a lot of content around that yesterday. So as it's now generated, introducing the new REI co-op halftime, and it even named it 2 plus tent. And it gives you some features of it. It talks about, wrote some content for this. Easy setup. And I mean, I have an REI half dome tent. It's really easy to set up. So I'm glad that it got that. Versatile, whether you can do this. So that's cool. So now we've got a little product announcement, right?
Hey, Chris.
Yep.
Let me just ask Adrian, who I believe is a contractor with NASA. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I just unmuted you, Adrian. Do you want to ask your question about copyright issues? And let me also point out that one of the things that we're doing at Angelbeat is increasingly involving lawyers and law firms with our issues, because they are at the forefront of these things. How do you legally protect yourself, protect your confidential data, deal with copyright issues, deal with keeping your confidential data and blocking it from LLM bots from accessing it? Adrian, do you want to ask your more detailed question if you can turn on your mic?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I was just told that AI generated images and videos can only be used for non-commercial gains because they don't, company, like if I was going to be REI and put this on my website and use it to sell these tents, I technically don't own the copyright for that image.
Yep. So very good point, right? And this is still, something that we've just like announced as of yesterday. We published a blog post about it. So I don't want to speak out of turn. And I also copied that blog post into your answer. And so we can actually ask it, like, let's go and get it to summarize it for us. So let's sort of pause that and we can do a new. Okay. Yep. So this commitment allows customers to use Microsoft's Copilot services and the output they generate without worrying about copyright claims.
So in effect, you're indemnifying people. Is that in a nutshell, Chris?
Yeah. And that's how I read this, right? Is if a customer is challenged on copyright grounds, Microsoft will assume responsibility for the potential legal risks involved. So what, this effectively says, right, is that we're trying to address that in a responsible way. And obviously talk with any sort of lawyers, but as AI law evolves, right, like these are questions that we're on the forefront of trying to answer.
Hey, Chris, since we're like in this post-webinar sort of off the record stuff, just out of curiosity, I'll put myself up as a guinea pig. What if you typed in create a picture of Ron Gerber promoting Angelbeat? What would
Oh,
it
excellent question.
what would happen? I'm scared to see. And by the way, when we started Angelbeat, I didn't realize this, but 25 years ago, Angelbeats with an S is a Japanese mime. So let's see what happens.
Let's see.
If it can even create something.
I'll try to create that. Let's look. You look a lot like a paintbrush right now.
Okay.
Which is nice. Kind of mimics the hair. It's good.
Well, let's see, just so you can
Yeah, just so we got it there. Yeah. You always give that a little
let's see. Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty generic. And
Okay.
like I said, it's not Dolly 3 is much better at dealing with like logos and stuff and text than it used to be, because Dolly 2 is no bueno. But this I don't know, that's a good question.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So if we go back to our demo here, if that's cool, the next thing I wanted to do was to say write an Instagram prompt based on, or Instagram post based on the image, and give me different scenes that the tent can be in. And so as it thinks about that, Instagram's cute because it uses emojis and hashtags, so that's cool. So then it talks to me and it says different scenes: mountain base, beachside, desert under the stars. And this is generated content that it thinks it could be different. And so if I say generate scenes or generate new images based on the answer above, let's see what we get. It's thinking about it somewhere. Now, one of the super cool things, right, that we want to talk about here, and I didn't touch on this at all, right, is the commercialization. I'm out. Am I done here? That's nice. I've been playing with this all morning, so it's I think it's a little annoyed at me. Is the commercialization of the AI services, right? And so if we have this is all included in sort of like enterprise 365 stuff. The new co-pilots are going to be, the pricing models for those are going to be announced next week at Ignite, or if they're not already, I think they may be announced already. But largely, the way that enterprises interact with the OpenAI models through Azure is actually not at a token by token level. It's at this thing called a PTU, which is a provision throughput unit. And that effectively gives a standard latency and capability of the model to receive inputs, so number of users, that we can effectively provide as a reserved instance or a committed instance for an API based model. And we do the same thing through our database units when we're talking about sort of number of users, scaling into a potential database through Cosmos DB or something like that. But the point being is that is the enterprise vector for purchasing these things. And it's something I didn't want to touch on here because this isn't really a sales thing. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to the, to Ron or to your account teams around how we can effectively set up and make sure that there is consistent performance in your AI applications. So now that we've generated some images here, the last one I wanted to show, and this is kind of a common experience, right, is to go back in and say, all right, so now create a product website landing page for this new product. And it will, again, start generating code for me that I can sort of copy paste from HTML into something else. So again, basic structures here. This kind of gives you an idea of how you can use AI to stitch together various inputs. And especially now is this thing called, so I'll give you one more acronym before I take off here, which is multimodal. I guess it's not an acronym, it's a new term. Multimodal AI. And so this is like taking AI from code inputs or from image inputs or from sound inputs, right? Or from, like anything that's basically not like human language inputs. So with that, any other questions before I turn it back over to Ron?
I'm looking here. I don't see anything else. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the whole strategy with Microsoft, if I could give one like more little tidbit here, right, is again to be that fast follow, right? So we invested all of this capital and servers and AI supercomputer stuff into OpenAI, right? And we did it so that we could advance and have them advance and help advance AI research. And the productionizability of that, or the productionization of that, from an enterprise standpoint, is really where Microsoft is leaning in. So all of these super cool things that are happening with OpenAI, that comes at a very fast follow pace through Microsoft. And we're thrilled to be partners in that space. And I'm personally thrilled to be working for a company that's a leader in the generative AI world right now. So thank you all for watching and for paying attention. Happy to take any further questions, or through Ron if you have them. Feel free to email them, and I'm happy to get back.